Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
All right, welcome back for another episode. This is Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. You are listening to the Networking RX podcast. Easy for me to say. Today I have a guest on, not just any guest. I have a repeat guest. I have good friend, longtime networking friend from Detroit, Michigan, Terry Bean, he is an author. He is a speaker. He's a social media professional. He does podcasting. If he's involved with TEDx Detroit. Terry, welcome back for a second run at the Networking RX.
Hey man, thanks for having me. It's boy, I do a lot of stuff, don't I? It's always fun to listen to my intro. I'm like, who does all that crap? I can't do any of it well, I'm sure.
Well, I know you do, and I do as well. But it's all tied together, right? It's all kind of in the name of building a brand, and you do a lot to help a lot of other people, and I think that's awesome. So
I learned it from you, bud. That's you talked about a long time ago. We're talking 25 years is what we know.
I know. We'll have to erase that out of the podcast.
Yeah, delete. Yeah, did I say I meant 12 and a half.
Yeah, 12 and a half. Yeah, there you go.
It's like half up.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a long time because I remember having a conversation with you, and everybody can hear this. I remember having a conversation with you getting into the elevator at St. Anne's Hospital, and you were telling me that you had come up with the name for a chapter because you were a director within what's now AmSpirit. And you came up with the name, the North Outer Belt chapter, which I think is really cool because that chapter is still going. The reason I was at St. Anne's Hospital is my third son was being born. So he's turning 21 or is 21 at the time this is coming up. So it's been a while, and it's been a lot of great history. But I'm glad I got you on here. I saw something that you posted on LinkedIn. It's probably on Facebook as well. I didn't see it there. But you call it the five pillars of a life well led, life well lived. Again, easy for me to say.
A wife well led. Yeah, good luck with that. Yeah, I would like to have that too.
A life well led or lived. But the 5 pillars, and 4 of them, I mean, they're all important. Don't get me wrong. Spiritual, physical, mindset, and financial. And then the 5th, and there's no particular order, was relationships. And I thought that was great. This is a podcast all about professional relationships and personal relationships as well. I mean, relationships are relationships. I mean, when does your personal life end anymore and your professional life begin? It doesn't. Our friends are our clients and our clients are our friends, and it's all melded together. But let's spend some time and let's talk about, the relationship pillar and how you see that being important and what people can do to kind of build that up and maybe even how it's tied into the other things, because it really is. I mean, our relationships really lead into our financial. Our relationships lead into our mindsets. I mean, if you're hanging around with people who have got a negative mindset, that stink is going to rub off on you, and physical, spiritual, it's all kind of tied together. So anyhow, I'm kicking it over to you.
It is, man. It is so inextricably tied, right? And so in the world, we always think about trying to have balance, right? So we want things to be, work-life balance. And that's what this talk was really for. It was for a group of human resource professionals. And, we were talking about the 5 pillars of a life well lived. And I started off talking about work-life balance and how everyone's looking to achieve that. Well, the reality is balance is kind of crap, right? If you think about it, it's even. There's no real movement. There's nothing that's going forward. Everything's kind of aligned. What you really want is you want harmony. You want things to move like in concert with one another. And so the idea for these 5 pillars for me, and I've been using these for probably a decade now, was how do I have these things aligned where I'm firing really well at least 3 or 4 of them at any given moment. Understanding that firing at all 5 of them perfectly well in any given moment is next to impossible,
right?
Because we have life, right? So if your work life is going great, your gym life may not be going as well. But if your relationship at home is horrible, you're going to spend all kinds of time in that gym, right? It's like whatever happens, there's always just a series of give and take. So for me, the relationship piece was really, really important. In the first relationship that I talk about is self, right? How are you relating to you? What do you know about you? What do you understand about you? What is your best practices? Where's your energy level from a circadian rhythm perspective, right?
Right.
How are you going to achieve your best results throughout the course of the day, week, month, year, right? And without knowing some of those things about you, I think it makes it really hard to get to know things about other people. One thing I've noticed in my life is I tend to be exceedingly authentic, right? Maybe a little too much so. It gets me in trouble because I'm like, no, this is how I feel and I'm going to share it. And if you don't like it, that's okay. I don't need you to like it, but it's my truth. So that's how it is. I think people really resonate with that. We were talking about 20 years ago. I remember a guy named Mike, and I won't use his last name, but Mike used to always say, "Fake it till you make it." That was a big comment of Mike's. And it is a 24-year-old fella, that meant something to me. And it was probably 24 years ago, 25 years ago. It's like, oh, that's a good saying. Fake it till you make it. That makes sense. As a near 50-year-old fella, that seems like some of the worst advice I think I've ever heard in my life.
Right.
So I really.
Well, I think people are smart. And we were even smart back then. That people know when you're faking it, right? Somebody reaches out to you on social media and they're, hey, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. People say I'm great. Your mom doesn't count. I'm sorry. You can kind of see through those things, right? You know how hard it is to do those sorts of things. So I totally agree with you.
I have a tendency to say other people would tell you X, Y, or Z. I would tell you I'm just this, right? So I'll take a little bit of the accolade, right? But it'll be from a third party. It won't ever be from me. As much as I probably am a guru in certain areas, I don't think I could ever say that with a straight face, man. I don't think I could tell you. I'd even have a hard time telling you I'm an expert. And I'm just writing something yesterday, a bio, where I've been practicing networking online in the real world for 25 years. At some point, even Malcolm Gladwell would consider me an expert at 25 years, right?
Right.
That hits the 10,000 hours by about 3x. So, but it's tough, right? So that relationship with ourself, in addition to the things I mentioned earlier, but how we think of ourselves, how we view ourselves, and how we present ourselves is really something that I think we need to consider and take stock in. And one idea that I share with people is ask those who are closest to you, whether in business or in personal life, how they perceive you. Get some feedback. Right? We do this in corporations all the time. We do 360-degree feedback sessions, and they're probably not as good as they could be because I don't think people are as honest as they could be. But if you're actually soliciting for your own growth, for your own benefit, for your own future, and tell them to be brutally honest, get that feedback, and then use that feedback to make a better version of you.
I totally agree.
Ever do anything like that? Ever get feedback like
that? Formally, no, I have not. But I do have people in my life who are not shy about giving me feedback.
You're getting it whether you want it or not.
Well, I mean, we'll leave last names out of it, but we know Gina. If Gina's listening, she knows we're talking about her. And most people who know us and know of Gina know who she is. And but she's a very direct person. And I tell people I appreciate that about her.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm totally, and I mean this all she's like a sister to me. I mean it in the best possible sense, because she can get on the phone and she can let me know exactly what she's thinking on something. And believe me, it's not good. And it's probably something I need to hear. And then in the next moment be, well, how are your kids? How's your wife? So she's able to separate those things. And I appreciate that, because I would rather have somebody be direct with me and tell me, hey, listen, I think this is wrong, and this is why I think this is wrong. And we can debate that, whether it's right or it's wrong. But I would rather that than somebody who is kind of lurking in the shadows. I think back to my 10-year high school reunion, and I was talking to I don't want to be sexist about this, just happened to be a woman. She was kind of like, oh, I can't stand that person. I'm like, well, why? Back in high school. It's like, back in high school, that's 10 years ago. Have you ever had a conversation with her? No. She would never want to talk. It's like, oh my gosh. And so I appreciate what Gene is about, and being direct with me and saying, hey, listen, I think this is wrong. Or I think this about you, or you could improve this way. I like that. But formally, no, I've never, really done that.
Your statements there made me think of the thought that, find people who care enough about you to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we need, right? We need people that are going to give us honest feedback, because I see way too many people that roll around with their head in the sky and in the clouds, and like, you didn't earn any of that. Why are you so inflated? And conversely, I see even more people rolling around with their chin down, staring at the ground, who, like, you're a badass. Be a badass, okay? You
Yeah.
Come on, let me slap you in the butt. Let's get you going. We gotta fire you up a little bit. So it happens in both, and I think if we had that feedback, that would be of value. So
no, I totally agree.
Relationship to self is huge, right? So some of the other relationships that I contemplated and shared thoughts on were, with our significant other, with our family, with our friends, with our God, whatever you define that as, with our coworkers and our colleagues, right? And with nature. So those were the 6 or 7 different relationships that we talked about. But I want to kind of dip into a couple of them. Because the ones that they all matter. Listen, I'm not going to say some matter, some don't. But the ones that really I think are important for this call are our colleagues at work and our business associates in general. So it's a matter of how do we build those. And years ago, in 2006, 2007, I'd been on LinkedIn for a couple of years, and I had a group of 3 people, and we were all talking about how do we maximize our LinkedIn experience, right? And one person said, all right, I'm going to go for the strongest quality connections. And they said, Terry, you're pretty pervasive. Why don't you go for the strongest quantity connections? And the other one did some myriad in between. And so I didn't like dive into adding as many connections as humanly possible, but I definitely let my network grow wildly, in that I would, if you invited me, I would accept, and I position myself as easy to find and easy to be invited. So as we sit here, I'm at 15 or 16,000 connections, but only have actual relationships with like a third of those people. So in the longer this goes on and the farther it grows out, the more I really start to value the idea that quality probably is better than quantity. But if we would have had this conversation 10 years ago, I would have been like, I don't know. I can't answer that. I think they're both really, really important. You have a exceedingly large network. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, mine's about 16, approaching 17, and my story is very similar to yours. You start out and you see people who have 500 plus, and I've got to get to 500 plus, and it's kind of like this, it's kind of like this addiction of just pulling on connections and pulling on connections. And if I had to do it all over again, I don't know that I would have done that, but I know it's kind of a yin and the yang, because you can't find the quality unless you're willing to deal with the quantity. And that's what I may reach out and connect with 100 people, and from that 100 people, I might pull out that shiny gem of a Berta Medina, with somebody we had talked about, our friend down in Florida. And she's been awesome.
She's stellar, like honestly stellar, unbelievably
I know
stellar.
she's great, but you kind of have to take the good with the bad. I mean, I'm throwing cliches out here, and so I kind of get it. I'm of the mind that I think I'm going to sit down with LinkedIn at some point and just cull through 1,000 or 2 relationship or connections that aren't relationships, just to make room, because they cap you out at 30.
Right.
And at some point, for me to have 16 or 17,000, it's no big deal, right? It's the marginal difference in that extra 1,000 really doesn't matter. And I don't want to be at 30,000 and not be able to take somebody on. That's good. And so I think that's probably going to be an exercise for me at some point. If I add 1,000, I'm going to take away 1,000.
It's interesting. That
Yeah,
is, especially when you don't want to wait until you're at 29,500 to do it either.
Right. Because what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the Berta Medinas. I'm looking for the Terry Beans, the Adam Connors. I'm looking for those people, and I need to build a stable of those people and not have it to be cluttered with, I don't know. Then I guess it'll probably be easy to go through and say, okay, this person's really not active, and they're not going to know if they're off my list anyway. So.
Yeah, I could go by country and figure out how to do that a little easier, I think.
Why do you say that?
Well, because I haven't actually looked, and as an exercise just for fun, I will look and I'll report back to you. I think there's 1,500 at least from India connections that I have. Right, so I have massive amounts of connections from different parts of the globe. Before Motor City Connect started, and it actually started as a result of all the connecting I was doing worldwide on LinkedIn. So
Right.
I was learning LinkedIn. I was learning social networking, because this is way before social media was a thing. I was learning Yahoo groups, and I was learning how to communicate with a bunch of different folks. And it was the confluence of those things that made me think none of these people give a shit about Detroit, and Detroit's falling apart at the seams in 2005, 2006. So I took that time and that energy that I was doing worldwide and focused it here. That was kind of how it started.
Right. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I spent a lot of time last year the last couple of years connecting with podcasters.
Yeah.
Because I find that podcasters, one, are really well connected, and by the nature of podcasting, and people out there, if you have a podcast, you get what I'm saying, and I know you do. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and when you're bringing people on as guests, you've had me on, I've had you on, it's a lot of work, and it's really kind of a tiny little gift to you. I appreciate you being on because that certainly helps me with content. You appreciate being on because it helps build the Terry Bean brand, and podcasters get that, and so they're just a great core of people. Generally speaking, there are every cross section of life. You have your idiots, right?
You do.
But by and large, Berta met her podcasting. Casey Hasten met her podcasting. Adam Connor, podcasting. Matt Ward, podcasting. So it kind of goes down the list of just a litany of great people. And so I find now that I'm trying to grow that way, which is a little more strategic than just, hey, I'll take anybody. Get me to 500. It's got to say 500. But that's years ago. I mean, that's 2008, 2009 that was passed. And I don't know. If I had to do it all over again, I would. I don't know how I would do it different. I don't know.
Yeah, I think about it from time to time. I think I would be more intentional with who I invite. And And I honestly, I don't send a lot of invites out. Right, most of 90% of my network invited me. Right, so I don't
Yep.
know that I'd necessarily flip that, but it would be 60-40 as opposed to 90-10. Right,
Yeah.
meaning that I would be at least choosing the people a little better. And it's an interesting thing. But I mean, I spent a lot of time with the goal being, how can I be of service? How can I help? Who can I help? Right. And so if you're not asking the right questions to begin with, it's real easy to come up with the wrong answers. And I'm not
Right.
saying they're the wrong answers. The connections are all fine. They're all good. It's not an issue. But the idea is, if you are super intentional about what you're doing the entire time, you probably don't end up with 16,000 random connections. Not that they're all random, but a lot of them.
No, I mean, I hear what you're saying. It's embarrassing when somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I see you're connected to this person. Would you please introduce me?" To say, especially for me or you, who are like, we're uber connected and we're supposed to be these relationship people. Hey, I don't know that person. That's embarrassing.
Right.
I've never met them. Now you can't maintain 16,000 people. I mean, you're always gonna have people out there on the fringe. But I don't know. It's embarrassing. But what are you going to do? But
I agree.
you need that base, because if you're sitting at 100, let's say you had 100 connections. We're just postulating here, but you had 100 connections, and they were the best connections in the world, right? Somebody's going on LinkedIn and they're saying, "Oh, Terry Bean's got 100. Big deal. I don't need to connect with him." But maybe it's the CEOs of the top Fortune 500, the Fortune 100 companies, right, are all Fortune 500 companies. If you kind of peel back and look and say, "Oh my gosh," but people don't do that. They'll look on the surface and say, "Oh, Terry, 100 connections." But
Not
when they
even
see
trying.
that, yeah, when you see that 500, then all of a sudden it's like, "Oh wow," and they start digging in. Okay, this guy's got 10,000 plus. Oh my gosh, there must be something to him, and that's not necessarily true. So
It's not necessarily true.
yeah,
I know a lot of people that yeah, what was the Millionaire Next Door book? They talk about the guy with the big all hat and no cattle.
yep, that's
Wasn't
it.
that the line?
Yep,
There's a lot of people that are doing a lot of fluffy things. There are a lot of people doing some good stuff too, right? That
yeah.
they're putting decent content out and trying to innovate and trying to inspire. I like that part. I really do. And the one thing you mentioned about podcasters, I feel like those are the common thread there, is these are people that believe they have something of value to offer and can't wait to do it, right?
Okay.
If you're going to start a podcast, most people are trying to figure out how to get information out. Maybe they're trying to figure out how to get eyeballs in, but they're trying to serve. At least that's been the common thread with most of the folks that I've been on.
No,
You
I think
notice
that's
that?
totally, yeah, it's totally true. I mean, your podcast is going to be very short lived if every week it's just an infomercial about what you got, right?
Right.
Hey, I've got a knife today. Okay, now I've got a watch. I got a wallet. Nobody's ever going to tune into that. People are attracted to value, right? If you walked into the room and said, "Hey, I'm here. I got things to sell," people are going to cut and run, right? But if you walked into the room and everybody knew that, "Hey, Terry's here," he always has a bit of insight. He always knows what's going on. He's always, he's always connecting me with somebody. People are going to beat a path to you to, "Hey, how's it going?" No different than when you were a kid, or when your daughter was a kid and you came home from trips and had something for her. "Oh, Daddy's home. What's Daddy got for me?"
That's right.
So
Where's the
um,
stuffed animal?
yeah, right. Um, let's talk about you. What are you working on? How can people help you? How can people get a hold of you?
So what am I working on? I've got a really interesting client too, actually, three technically, but one's really interesting. A company called Assemble, hireassemble.com. They are bringing in experts to solve problems in marketing or in app or web development or in consulting around business growth, right? So there are 77 different disciplines inside of marketing right now. And you think about the average company that may have a marketing department of 4 people, how are you going to exceed in these 77 different disciplines, right? So these guys have kind of, you look at Upwork or Fiverr as a place to go find some professionals. These guys have taken that up a notch. They'll scope the project. They'll write up the whole description of it. They'll go find the expert. They'll vet the expert, and they'll guarantee the expert, meaning if you don't like this person, they'll give you a totally different one. So it's a really, really cool project, and I really like what they're doing. And the entrepreneur behind it is brilliant and has built up several different 9-digit businesses. That's in the hundreds of $1 million for people that aren't in the 9-digit in counting commas. So that's pretty cool. And then I've got a really nice growing insurance client in the Detroit area. And I love the guy. He's a wrestler from U of M, and he's just one of those leave it on the table kind of guys. So those are fun. I'm still speaking virtually and doing some training as time as people are in need, and I love doing that. And so that's good. And then the rest of it, man, I'm enjoying summer, right? I live in Michigan, and so it's so condensed that we have to figure out how to get as much time as humanly possible out of it, right? I'm mad that I didn't get on my paddleboard yet today because it's 10:23. I'm like, how am I going to fit this in? So,
right, gotcha.
These are troubles, man. These are real world troubles.
Yeah. How do people get a hold of you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Trybean.com, TRYBEAN.com. But you could find me as that or Terry Bean on LinkedIn. Trybean's better on Facebook. Trybean's good on Instagram. About.me/Terry Bean is my About Me. I love that one. It is because that one's got the links to all the places.
Yep.
Yeah. So I just actually refreshed that the other day. I haven't looked at it in a couple of months. So I was like, oh, you know what? We should put some new information on here. So always
awesome.
Good, man. Yeah. And I still like these things, these phones. I talk to people on the telephone. I was like, 419-1840. Yeah, that sounds like a thing still. So
yeah.
It's like, we won't say what that is, but you and I know what that is.
Yep, that's right.
It's like, wait, why do I still know that? You know?
Yeah.
Because I guess you need to. So it's it, man. But I welcome people to come check out and hang out and talk and hop on a Calendly or hop on a Zoom call, whatever the case may be. I'm just here to support, man. I want to help people grow. That's my mission in life.
Sounds great. Appreciate your time on the program.
Yes, man. Good to see you as always.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.